Okay. I will call the meeting to order. As you can see, we have several people on Zoom. Make sure that if you want to make a comment or ask a question, you need to say who you are and where you live, what street, just like town meeting. And if you have a soft voice, the mic is on, so you can use the mic. I also would ask that you follow the same rules as town meeting, that you speak directly to the chair, that you are respectful to everybody else in the meeting, and give everybody a full listen. Normally, we don't follow the very formal rules of like speaking to the chair, but with a large group, it works better if you go through me. All right, first we're going to review the minutes. We'll do July 1st, July 13th.
No.
Any changes?
I don't see it. I
Minutes of July 13th are approved. August 17th. Feel free to pull down extra chairs and sit wherever you like. Any changes? All in favor? Minutes of August 17th are approved. Okay, some other quick information. We sent the letter to the select board requesting that they appoint Cindy as a regular member. We signed and resent the letter that was confirming the mitigating properties. I think they lost it or something, so we just re-signed it and resent it. And Great Horse sent us a notice they'll be spraying and treating the ponds 9/12 and 9/30. So if you are interested, you can contact them and try to arrange to be there. Okay, we're going to open the continued hearing for 530 Glendale Road, 0 Point Energy. DEP number 1730233. This is an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a special kind of notice of intent. It only covers the delineation of the wetlands on the property. It doesn't cover anything having to do with the project itself. That would be a second submission of an NOI with any structures that are proposed or access roads or anything like that. So this is just essentially scientifically looking at where the wetlands are and coming to agreement upon that. The delineation, when it's approved, lasts for 3 years. And it's not attached to any particular project, it's attached to the parcel. So, any project, a house, two houses, whatever, could all get proposed, under the delineation for the next 3 years. That being the case, the things that we discussed tonight should be relevant to the wetlands and to questions you have about the wetlands. How they know things, what it means, any of the science of it that you need to understand or something you can't find on the map. But questions about anything having to do with the structure will come much later in this process when the NOI is submitted. All right. Okay. So Raina, are you going to do the first part of the presentation?
I can start if you'd like, yes.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Raina Volosky. I am with Ty & Bond out of the Middletown, Connecticut office with our main office in Westfield, Massachusetts. I'm a professional wetland scientist and a certified professional soil scientist. Ty & Bond was scoped with a peer review for the ANRAD on behalf of the Town of Hampden Conservation Commission. The review was a review of the resource delineations conducted by Goddard Consulting on September 2021, and a review of the abbreviated notice of resource and area delineations, which was dated February 8th, 2022. This is for the Conservation Commission's approval of jurisdictional wetland resource area boundaries. As stated, ANRADs are comprehensive reviews and accurate descriptions of a property to identify areas subject to bylaws and the Wetland Protection Act. In general, this helps minimize the requests for additional information by regulators in the issuance of an order of resource area delineation, if and when a future project is proposed. And the applicant is responsible for providing the information required for the review to the issuing authority, and in this case, that is the Conservation Commission. So we did a technical review of the NRAD application dated February 8th, 2022. The field review of the resource delineations was performed on June 10th and June 16th of 2022. A field walk was conducted on August 22nd, 2022 with the Conservation Commission, the landowners, Goddard Consulting, and representatives of 0 Point Energy Consulting. I did want to note that a mild drought status started on May 1st of 2022, and a critical drought status was August 1st, 2022, and that's when it started. That's relevant for part of the review for the water course, for the one of the water courses. So I'm actually going to start with the technical review, just overview of what we reviewed and what we found. So the technical review was the application materials, which included the ANRAD, the wetland border report, the resource mapping such as floodplain, like the FEMA floodplains, soils, those kind of things, the delineation field data forms, the certified list of abutter and notifications to abutters, affidavit of service, transmittal letter, and the NRAD plan sheets. So the review of the resource area delineation plan, which I will share now. Oh, yeah, I've been disabled as a participant screen sharing. Is there a way I can be added to that, please? Sorry, I should have asked before.
That's okay. We're just very new to this.
All right. Something happened. Oh. I'm viewing somebody else's screen.
Can you try it now?
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Can you see the map?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the property that was investigated. It's the dark black is the property outline, which I just followed with the cursor. There's a wetland right here, a water course right here. There's a wetland right here. This is an upland exclusion. There's a wetland over here, and there's a water course over here. So that's what was found. That's what was presented on the resource area delineation. So on the delineation plan, there were 2 streams were identified. This one to the west and this one to the southeast. So both streams are shown on the USGS topographic map, which does not differentiate as intermittent or perennial. It is within the commission's discretion to conservatively presume that all streams are shown as perennial due to lack of documentation of field observation and the stream not flowing. So during both the field review in June and the commission field walk in August, this stream was observed to have flowing water in the channel. The June one, there was actually 4 inches of water, and it is marked on the map as was labeled as intermittent stream. So it's up to the commission to decide if they want intermittent or perennial stream. So the next technical review item are the delineation forms. So additional information is required to complete the forms. Soil texture, redoxamorphic features such as concentrations or depletions, the percentage of those redoxamorphic features, and the location, whether they're in the matrix or pore linings. Those will help determine the hydric, if the soil was hydric at the location of the plot. Yep.
Could you explain what redoxamorphic is?
Sure. Redoxamorphic features are where the iron in the soil either becomes concentrated or is removed from an area, and the iron becomes, I almost want to say, like liquid or fluid when when the oxygen has been reduced out of the soil due to prolonged inundation. So that is an indicator of hydric soil. So if there's a certain percentage of either these concentrations or depletions, the depletions will be gray usually, and the concentrations are usually red. They look like red streaks. Along with the base color of the soil, so that's the matrix color, those characteristics are depend on what depth. Those are what are going to determine if a soil is hydric or not. Was that okay?
Yes, great.
Okay. In addition to that, hydric soil indicators, which are provided by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, should be identified. And if there was any recent or historic disturbance of the property. So that should be included on the delineation forms. There are three BVWs were identified on the property. And only two wetland data forms were included in the ANRAD. It suggested that each primary cover type of each wetland has a data form. So there's 3 wetlands, only 2 data forms. In addition, site photographs of the existing conditions were not included in the ANRAD. So that was our overview of the technical review. Did you want questions now, or do you want to just go into the field?
Anybody have any specific questions about the science here? Do you know what a BVW is? So bordering vegetated wetland, which means it, well, Rainey, can you explain? You want to explain that?
It borders a stream. Yeah, it's a wetland that borders a hydrologic input, so a stream.
John?
John Matthews, North Munson Road. The question I have was any handheld samples done for the soil to identify? You said that there would have been iron that had precipitated to the surface. Am I correct in saying that?
Not to the surface, no. Within the matrix of the soil.
In the matrix. So
They do a core that's like 24 inches.
right. Did you do a core sample?
Yeah, they did cores all over the place.
They did. Oh, thank
Do
you.
you know how many cores you did, Renee?
I have no idea. I can't tell you how many I did on the whole property, but it's about anywhere from 100 to 200 easily.
I did a bunch.
Yeah, it's with a hand tool. It looks like a big T with a screw at the bottom, and then you put it in the soil, and then you twist it, and then each is about an 8-inch long, I don't know, bucket, I want to say. And then each of those 8 inches you want to pull out, review the soil, review how deep it is, and then where the hydric soil indicators such as the redoxamorphic features are located within that 24 inches will help determine if it's a hydric soil or not. Did that answer the question?
There's another question?
Yeah, can you know about it? You mentioned that you did this during drought as well. How does that affect the evaluation of the wetland?
I'm sorry, I could not hear the question.
She's asking how the drought affected this evaluation of the soil.
Oh, so the drought did not affect the evaluation of the soil. The drought was affecting the flow of the water course, the stream. So that's why I mentioned the drought. When we look at soils and vegetation, we look at wet soils. So even if when we take the sample, the soil is dry, we take water, we carry water with us, and we wet the sample. So we do a wet review of the soil.
No, I didn't ask how it affected the soil. I asked how the drought, the evaluation of the wetlands itself, how the drought would affect that.
Well, what she's saying is it doesn't change the soil cores at all. It does change the vegetation and the streams to a certain extent. And as she talks about those, she'll discuss them.
I was gonna ask a similar one. I was gonna just say, maybe for everybody's clarity, you just talk a little bit about the difference between an intermittent and a perennial stream and what is required to declare something an intermittent stream versus a perennial stream, and how the drought changes that definition.
Sure. So usually US topographic map and differentiates between a perennial and an intermittent stream by line type. The topo map for Hampden did not differentiate. So the intermittent stream is determined if it's dry over a certain period of time. So even though we were in a drought when I did the field review in June, and again, when we were in August, there was flowing water in the channel. So if there's flowing water, you know, an intermittent water course would not have had any flowing water at those times. So that's why the drought was mentioned.
Okay,
I do have a question. It's not the right time. So is the commission confirmed that they're thinking on that street, notice that Uncle Street?
No, we will make, after they present their peer review, and then next meeting will be discussing the rebuttal from the applicant. Then we'll make findings, and then we'll be debating what we want to call things and what they'll be determined.
Right now, not those.
Not yet.
On there.
Giant what? Who didn't I see? Oh, hi.
Jason Barroso, again, I just had a question. I heard that the first, stream close to Glendale was labeled as intermittent, and had water flowing. But I didn't hear if there was water flowing in the other stream or not.
The other stream is Eastbrook.
Yeah.
So it's huge.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I just didn't know
yes,
if
it was flowing. And to a certain extent, it doesn't matter because they submitted it with the 200-foot acknowledged. So if they called it an intermittent, still gave it 200 feet, we wouldn't care.
Understood.
But the other thing to know is that when the state declares a drought, you can't prove that a perennial stream designated as perennial is intermittent, but you can determine if you want to that a stream is perennial from intermittent. There's a you can't say it's dry when it could be the drought, but you can say it's free flowing when it is.
So being that side farm, the experts said it's flowing. That's not enough at this point, so it's running.
No, there's certainly we have our opinions, yeah, but there's a lot of data that goes into that.
Okay.
At any point in time in this state, if you can take photos of an unintruded, uninterfered with stream that's dry for 4 straight days, and it's a qualified person making that observation, and they can show that there's no impoundments and no diversions, it can be declared intermittent. But you can't do that during the drought.
She's developed 1988. I was looking at the law, I was looking at streams and photographing them. It talks about taking photos for 4 days, any consecutive 12-month period. So what does that mean? Does that mean they have to water some months?
No, it means,
Does that make sense? My question?
yeah, it means, do you want to speak to that, Raina? About the 4 days?
I did not hear what the question was.
She's wondering about how the 4 days fit into a year, et cetera. I'm not sure it's relevant here because nobody's trying to turn a perennial stream into an intermittent stream.
Okay,
And if that was gonna happen, we would go over that.
okay. That's fair. Thank you.
I'm sorry. But if someone wanted to prove it, you can bid. They'd have to go through that process.
Yes,
And right now, the determination of the stream, there is no position.
they presented it as intermittent. They're consultants. They went through the same soil and vegetation and all the stuff, and they decided it was intermittent. The peer reviewer decided that, and in fact, when we were out there ourselves, we were out there for 2 hours, or most of us. It was flowing during a critical, the day before they declared it critical. So, that tends to give you a belief that it's probably perennial, but you need to look at the data.
So for the record, I mean, did the commission observe this flowing stream during our sidewalk? I know we walked down that section and we observed depressions from, that could possibly repel water from the storm which occurred the day before. But when you call it flowing, I don't believe that was the case at that time. I mean, there were large sections where there was no flow. And then, you know, it was a low, flat level area with multiple depressions.
Okay, that's a
So it was
rebuttal.
collected-
We're actually talking only about the peer report
No,
right now.
I'm just, you know, I'd like to state that for the record because it was stated that the stream was flowing.
I shouldn't have brought up our site visit. The fact is that she's speaking about their review, saw it as flowing with ripples. Okay, continue.
Thank you. So that was the technical review of the application and the application materials. So, the field delineation review, which is the actual physical going out to the site, looking at the soils, the vegetation, the topography, the hydrologic indicators. So prior to the field delineation, we did a desktop review of publicly available information. We reviewed state and federal wetland mapping, historic aerial photographs, the Federal Emergency Management Act flood insurance study for Hampden County, the flood insurance rate map or a FIRM, and the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service web soil survey. As I mentioned earlier, the delineations were performed on June 10th and 16th, 2022 by myself and Megan Wodick, who is also with Ty and Bond. So we reviewed the site in accordance with local, state, and federal guidelines, including the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, the 1987 Army Corps of Engineer Wetland Delineation Manual, and the North Central and Northeast Region Supplement 2012, and the field indicators for hydric soils in New England. Okay, so I'm going to switch maps. Hold on, it's going to take a second. Just so you can see where things are. So each wetland had the lines were numbered differently to be able to distinguish where things were out in the field. So GC 1 to 177 is this very large wetland in the center. So the GC 200 series is an upland exclusion. So this middle section is upland. So the wetland boundary is the green line and the wetland is in between here. The 300 series was over here. It's, for some reason, it's a dashed line instead of a solid line. It goes off property. The 400 line is this, this line, which goes along the eastern boundary and the stream. There's a 500 line, which goes over here. The 600 line is over here, the 700 line. And then, I forgot the 800 line, which is over here. So it's this little bit, just so you can get a general sense of what I'm discussing. All right, so the flag series 1 to 177, so it's this big, huge area. I will show you. Okay, So these areas that I have highlighted are areas that we noted some discrepancies while we were out there. So we're going to talk about this section right here, the 100 series first. So there was a stream identified within the wetland boundaries that had not been noted in the wetland border report and had not been delineated in the field. There were several areas identified where the delineation line was 50 to 100 feet into the upland, beyond, like further out of the wetland boundary. So the wetland boundary was further in than where it was delineated. And we noted.
Show us where that is. Could you run your pen where that is?
Oh, sure. So right here, we noted some of that. And right here, we noted.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for reminding me. I know, like in my head, I know where it is, but I guess you guys don't. So in these sections, they lacked hydric soils. The vegetation was determined to be dominated by facultative or facultative up wetlands. That means they typically do not grow in wetlands. There's about a 50% chance the facultative grow in wetlands or uplands, and facultative up means they almost always are found in upland. In order to be considered wetland, it needs to be a facultative wet. It can be mixed with facultative and obligate. So those are found in wetlands more. I can go into the percentages, but that's the quick version. So again, they lacked hydric soils. The vegetation was not determined to be hydrophytic. And, it is inherent for some upland inclusion within wetland delineations. It benefits the wetland boundary. So if you're trying to make a line, instead of zigzagging super close, like within like 2 feet of each other, you can make a straight line, and a few feet might be included in the wetland boundary, and that's customary, and that's part of the delineation. But this was a very significant. There wasn't enough area in between where the line had been and where we found hydric soils, hydrophytic vegetation, and hydrologic indicators. So that's why those were pointed out. So that's those points. This area right here, again, did not meet hydric soils, hydric vegetation. Again, when we were out there, even though we were in a drought, the vegetation was very lush. I want everyone to understand that it wasn't wilted. It looked fine. So usually during a drought, you're gonna see like very weepy plants, brown plants, some areas without vegetation, as I'm sure you've noticed, the trees are turning brown. So none of that was happening when we were out there in June. There was the field had flowers and all this stuff. So even though we were in a drought, there was nothing going on that would have impeded the delineation. So in here again, no hydric soils were observed. In here also, there were no hydric soils. There were very limited wetland plants. I think that we saw like one facultative wet plant. So it wasn't it wasn't dominated by wetlands. And then this area was also considered to be upland. All right, so that's the That's the 102,
I
well,
think
this,
that's our pond right there or there.
what the, there's a, sorry,
Who's speaking?
I just moved it.
Oh, okay.
no, okay. All right. The 300 series, which, here we can go up again to find the 300. So the 300 series is this area. So there's a wetland found along here. There's a chain link fence over here. There was no discrepancies found in there. The 400 flag series, which is this right here. This one, I'll show you where that was. So there was 4 inches of water in the channel during the investigation. Again, there had been a drought for month and a half at that point. We also found hydric soils and dominant wetland vegetation within here, and we also found hydrologic indicators within. It didn't go up to the barn, so it went from the barn down up to the driveway over here. And water was actively seeping out of this area too when we were there. In addition, this area right here, there's a very large hill slope. It's covered with reed canary grass. And again, it was seeping, we were stepping, and water was in our boots at that point, and there was hydric soils and hydrophytic vegetation. So those areas would need to be reviewed for the delineation for the ANRAD. In addition, we found an isolated wetland that was up here that had there were no flags in the field, and it wasn't on the sorry, my kids are knocking. It wasn't on the plan. We found hydric soils, hydrophytic vegetation, and hydrologic indicators. There was a couple inches of surface water in there that we found. So we just did a quick plot of, just the very characteristic wetland area. However, it needs to be surveyed in the fields.
You need to go to the door. We can wait.
Oh, me? No. They're fine. Thank you. Sorry, I just hear banging in the background. My husband got them. So that is the fields. That was the field delineation findings. So in summary, the submittal of, we recommended the submittal of 1 data form per vegetated wetland. So again, the 2 were submitted, and there are 3 wetlands on site. Clarify the line type, BVW edge, which I can in here. This BVW edge, is it this green solid line, or is it the dashed solid line? I mean, that's review the field delineations where noted in the summary review provided to the commission. Produce the documentation or study for if it's an intermittent or perennial stream. And yeah, the NRAD application is, again, a comprehensive review, an accurate description of the property. So it should add additional descriptions, into this stream in here. Again, it wasn't, we didn't take any notes or anything in there. So that is that for me. So if anybody has any other questions.
Abutters, does anybody have a question? Yes,
Could you go back to that map? I'm sorry, my name is Darla. I'm the mother, 564 Glenville Road. And if you go back to the map you were at in the last square that you showed in the upper right corner.
the isolated land, subject to flooding,
That's the.
yeah.
That-
Yeah, so- Yes, if you go over towards the property line, straight across that map line,
Which one?
the upper top corner
Oh.
of the opposite side.
This one?
Oh, you're saying over by the pond?
Yes, towards the line.
Oh, over here?
More in the middle. How does that property line on? The top corner and over.
Do you want to walk up there and point it out? Yeah, watch the board.
Yeah.
No, she's waiting.
Yeah,
So I'm talking right here. This is the end of my property and this is where Galavati's property is.
mhm.
I have a whole lot of wetlands coming through here as well.
She's talking about the tip of the BVW that's up the center, the upper tip.
Right
Yes,
there.
right there, right there.
She says, it seems like it crosses the border to her.
Yeah, we did review above, there's almost like a culvert right in there. It's historic, it's been there for a while. We reviewed between the property line and the culvert, and there were no, there's no hydric soils or no dominant wetland vegetation, just in that area. The wetland boundary was very defined. So they very well could be. I'm not saying that they aren't any on property, they are above property, but we did not review off that property up there.
Oh, there's two people online asking to come on.
I'm watching the map. Thank you.
Who's asking? Who's asking? Oh, they just wanted to get in. They wanted to get questions.
Yeah.
Okay, is there another question? I just don't realize the mic's on. Yeah, it's best to keep your mic on. All right, Commissioners, is there any, do you have any questions for?
I just wanted to clarify the intermittent perennial question. When I was out in the site visit, we discussed this and it seems to indicate that an appropriate time to really gauge this would be non-drought season. And with a 4-day observation period. So I think there's other people that of the audience that want clarity about it. So me, myself, I understand what she's saying, understand what they're saying, understand what we're saying, but I feel a decision on that intermittent perennial can't be made at this time until drought is.
If, if we were going to accept it as intermittent, we would need to go out of drought to make that determination. Okay. All right, Rory, would you like to say, ask questions or make a presentation, whatever?
I'm going to defer to, we can't rebut. Because again, Mr. Canola and we'll go to Stephen, they have presentations, but it may be slightly different than what is shown on the screen today. Are you okay with that?
Yes,
Can I just ask, I wasn't sure the exact time, I have a couple of questions, so if you didn't want that, maybe I should just ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
More in terms of the timeline. And again, these are just questions, I'm not an expert, I just want to present them. So it sounds like there was a number of flags missing at the time of the independent assessment. And those flags are important because they stay there throughout the entire construction process, correct?
Right.
So is it coming to tackle flags with plates?
Most of the time, yes.
Okay,
And their response that we'll be discussing next week,
okay.
next 2 weeks, I'm sorry, the 21st.
Yep.
Will address, it should address that.
Right.
Either they should be replaced or they should give us a reason that they're not replaced.
Okay. And the two streams that were found, those will be identified as well in the final delineation.
They would have to speak to that in their response. When they do their presentation, they would speak to that theoretically. Yeah, you delineate all the wetlands in the property.
Okay. And the isolated wetland area, that will be incorporated into it as well, because there's a wetland.
Yes, apparently they, after the field review, they had a little trouble finding it. So my understanding is that they plan to find it between now and the 21st.
Has the applicant already started making some of the corrective actions? Are they gonna do that?
You want to answer that?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Beth. I'm not a.
Okay.
I will-
Yes, no, we've been out there, water consulting, that will be many of the areas. And-
Can everybody hear him?
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
You need to pull that little disc toward you.
Well, that's only gonna go weird.
Yeah, so after the site visit, with the Conservation Commission, the wetland scientists from Goddard Consulting did go back out to the site, and redelineate some of the areas. We still have to confirm the isolated wetland. And I believe that the isolated wetland is only jurisdictional if it is a certain size, and if it's not a certain size, then it does not fall under the ANRAD, the delineation that is shown on the enforceable for the Conservation Commission.
Hampden has a special rule about isolated land subject to flooding. The state rule is that it has to have a volume of a 1/4 acre. In the Hampden wetland bylaws, it has to be 1/8 of an acre. And if it is identified as isolated land subject to flooding of 1/8 of an acre or more, then it's granted essentially an extra buffer. And has to be taken into consideration, not on all the features that are normally taken into consideration of wetlands, but things like stormwater and drainage, and things like that, it becomes relevant.
So, yeah, so continuing, we are in the process of addressing these items, and we should be in a position to provide an updated plan to the commission for final plan to the commission with isolated wetland by the next meeting. In general, for the record, we don't dispute any of the findings by Time Bond. All their recommended flag repositioning areas. We don't have any concerns with those, especially the ones in the center of the site, which are actually providing the site additional upland area. We don't have any concerns. And as far as the perennial versus intermittent stream topic, at this point, due to the conditions, existing drought, we are going to proceed as if it is a perennial stream and provide the required 100-foot and 200-foot riparian zones on the proposed plan, and we'll take that to permitting when we develop the permitting package and design drawings. At a later date, we may revisit that topic when the conditions are more favorable, but that likely can occur for at least about, I'd say, at least 4 to 6 months. So, in efforts to move things forward, we will be working under the presumption that the stream originally labeled as intermittent is perennial and moving forward the jurisdictional buffers and requirements that a perennial stream receive.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about that part? Yes.
I just have one more question. If that stream is listed as parental, that is the only access to get to that acreage, is that right?
There is a road there now that crosses it, yes. In the NOI, they have to, one thing that gets evaluated is the access road and any stream crossings there are. In 96, was it? They did the new stream crossing rules. So it may or may not be, it may have to get updated if it was built after the new stream crossing rules were written, but there is a road there.
Right, I understand there's a road there, but would that be, if it's moving around on stream, it's okay, not making that happen. Trucks and.
It has to have a very tightly designated crossing type. They have to have certain qualities. They tell you what kind of a support you can have, how wide it has to be, how it has to be anchored into the banks, all that sort of stuff.
The
That,
type of bridge.
yeah, that would all come in the NOI. With the proposal for the actual, he was calling it the design, that's the proposal for the actual project. It doesn't get reviewed as part of the INRED, but if we designate it as a perennial stream, it does have to get treated that way. Which does make it fall under special stream crossing rules. There's a whole little handbook you could actually download from the web if you wanted.
Last one for now.
Well, feel free.
Once all of the recommendations have been given, taken care of, it's time to go back out there and discuss it.
We have asked a tie and bond. Raina, have you decided?
I'm
We've
sorry.
asked them if they were willing to,
She did.
it's not in the proposal. That was the contract that was currently signed. We've asked if they were willing to make an addendum which would entail going back out there to recheck it.
And what they say, you know.
Then we have to check it ourselves
Somehow
or
it's gonna-
accept it as factual.
Yeah, somehow.
So Raina, did you decide if you're gonna come back out or not?
If we come back and recheck the new delineation, is that what you're asking?
Uh-huh.
Yes,
We have not decided. Yeah, we're still talking about it. We'll get back to you. Hopefully, sorry.
So they would write an addendum to the current contract, and then we would have to agree to that and sign it and all that sort of stuff. And then they would do it. If they agree to it.
Yeah, it just seems like in the report, not being, again, not doing what I do. A lot of technical deficiencies, so I think we definitely want to check.
We would prefer that, yes. But they don't have to, if they don't want to, it's not in their contract presumes that everything's done when they get there. They check it all out and give us a review and a report. This is actually their last required component of the contract, this presentation.
It's never involved more money.
Yeah, there is actually money left in the fund. They had to put money up because it's all paid for by the applicant. And if Ty and Bond agrees to do it, then we
You're just
will.
surprised that the commission would not take under that responsibility. You think you wanted that to.
Well, Ty and Bond was picked for a reason, and that's because they're very, very, very reliable. So they have a lot of projects.
Yeah.
And whether they want to take on another small piece or not, that will be up to them. We could theoretically hire a separate consultant to go out and do that. It would be a little tough, but we could try. It's actually a very tough parcel to walk. All of these guys can explain to you. Many places, the vegetation they're talking about is 5 feet high. You know, it's like walking through.
More so, kind of, between having some of you.
Yeah, for one of us, it's pretty tough. For me, it was at some point impossible.
question is, if commission sees other things on the map, the timeline, and see what the time of the map is done, you guys add it on? Because I know based on what I looked at on that map, there's a stream that ran on and see. And then there's another stream on the top right corner off the property, and I know that one response. That makes sense?
If there are things we think are incomplete,
Yeah,
at the next meeting, when they're discussing all of their findings, we would let them know things we think are still missing.
okay.
You know, as he said, they're still working on some of the extra documentation. They did send us a preliminary document in the middle of the day today. Bonnie's already posted it online. So you can go, oh, it's not online? Okay, so she will get that up on the web when when she can. She only works 4 days a week, half a day, so
No, so I
it
just,
might be Monday even.
that's okay. When I looked on that map, there was another stream. I saw a wet spot that I wanted to see, and I'm like, okay. And then I know the stream that's not on, we probably would back to the buffer. I was just. curious
Yeah.
and everything.
Well, as Randy was saying about seeing things that are wetlands,
Yeah,
there can be water that's above the ground that looks like a pool or has a pool quality to it or makes the ground look funky. But if it doesn't have certain other qualities, like that's why John was asking about, did they do the pores? If you look under that ground in a pore and the pore shows that the soil's been dry for a long time or that the water doesn't go there, then it's still not hydric soil. So it's still not a wetland. There are multiple qualities that have to be met for it to be a wetland, not just, some people think if it looks dry, it's not wetland, and if it looks wet, it is. And if that couldn't be farther from the truth, they can look bone dry and be a wetland, and it can look very wet and be not. So that's why we have to pay these guys to do it.
yeah, well, I was just curious, because I saw it on different maps, and didn't see it on that. That makes sense.
Yeah, as far as the streams down the middle, that is something we would address.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. I just got word that we will be submitting an addendum to recheck.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so when we get that, we'll forward it to everybody else. Thank you. Okay, is there any more questions for Raina? Can she go? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commission, any questions, clarifications? One thing I wanted to mention is I don't know if it just didn't get put on the map, but on the new maps, I didn't see any mean annual high water or bank. DEP will give us a very hard time about that. So if you accept it as a perennial stream, you've got to designate mean annual high water and or bank. It looks on the map that we got this afternoon, like it's just 100 feet and 200 feet, but it actually has to be from the mean annual high water or bank. And I think I can speak for all of us. We would strongly prefer that you delineate those internal streams. It's hard to make a finding that says, we know they're there, but they didn't delineate them, so we're just not going to talk about them. It's easier just to have them marked onto maps. Sorry, I have to check all my questions. Oh, I forgot to ask my one question. Okay, I'll ask you. Raina, you still there? I think she signed up.
I am still here if you have any further questions.
Okay, we were told, and probably you saw it when you were reviewing the historic documents, that there was an extensive diversion drainage system put in under the track when they put the horse track in there. From the geology that you're aware of and all of that, would you see that as diverting sheet flow into the westernmost stream?
I mean, I didn't see signs of it when I was out there, so it doesn't really affect that right now. So no.
Is that what the flowing type small for the?
Yes. And since that would take a bunch of drainage, the question is it affecting that stream, which runs essentially along one edge of it? But you don't think so?
I do not believe so, no.
That is assessed as well.
You think that can be assessed in a drought?
I mean, if it's taking drainage and putting it somewhere else, then probably.
Yeah, we have to just take it into account, I think, in our findings. And
Yeah.
certainly it would get mentioned.
I would definitely note that it's there.
Okay. All right, I think that's it finally. Other comments? Yes.
If I said what is smaller than, bigger than, whatever family having bylaw. Whose jurisdiction does it fall under?
If it's under an eighth of an acre volume, then it's not an isolated land subject to flooding that's under jurisdiction.
Okay, so nothing.
It
around.
doesn't count, so to speak.
Okay. They can build on it, it's basically their, chance.
All the other wetlands have buffers, and the streams have buffers of different sizes depending if they're perennial or intermittent. And the bordering vegetated wetland that overlaps those boundaries, there's a special rule for how they interact and which one supersedes the other.
You think the, this is not the town right now is accurate, but
They're never considered accurate.
okay,
The reason that we get the delineation done is to see if those are really there. They're drawn from overheads, they're drawn from prior maps. And it's essentially a guide. When we go out to somebody's property, if it shows something, it kind of helps us know where to look. And where there might be something rather than walking a 50-acre parcel at random. We can use the things that are on those maps, but they're just suggestive.
so what are that's the students in the middle. Goes out to the delineation as well.
We've asked for that.
Okay.
I'll chime in on that. I wanted to ask a question, Steve River, the city wellness scientist, consultant. So in delineating the internal streams, is it going to change your jurisdiction at all? So the stream is within the wetland and it's intermittent, it's McCaffrey Bank Pond, which would be internal within the wetland. Just curious if, we're not at the point of proposing work or anything, but it's not going to really affect, where the jurisdiction is on the site. So our thought is to how much do you want it? There's a lot of extra effort to go out and flag it and survey it. There are a lot of internal channels, but they don't necessarily change what the jurisdiction.
Yeah, I understand that it might not change how this project would be affected,
So we could call out on the plan that is specifically not part of the ANRAD, so it's.
but it does change what gets transferred to the GIS maps. And we would prefer to have anything that shows up on the property, show up
Oh,
on.
so this is gonna be digitized and put into the town maps. We thought they were going to kind of
Yeah, say somebody goes to build houses there or some other thing, there might be a reason that would be relevant.
The comment Steve made was the jurisdictional area doesn't change, so you have the stream, and there's a 100-foot buffer on each side. Well, that stream is within wetland, which is bigger than the stream.
Right,
The buffer is actually gonna be taken from the edge of the wetland.
true.
And it's primarily, we pull the map up from that center, that very large center wetland. I mean, when we did the field, sidewalk, I believe Regina stated that it wasn't necessary to delineate that internal limit stream as it was primarily located within the BBW. We're not excluding the BBW boundary. It's just going out and.
We don't know, though, if the rules are gonna change. You know, maybe BBW won't supersede streams forever. Things change all the time. So, I mean,
Weigh in on this?
your argument is that BBW supersedes intermittent buffer. So we shouldn't care about the intermittent buffer because of the wetland.
No, not that you don't care or supersedes that the BBW buffer is gonna be always gonna be greater. And encompass whatever, if there was a buffer, the buffer that would be associated with that area. We'll say you have a line, the stream's a line, right? You have 100 feet here, 100 feet there. Well, the wetland is.
Yeah, I understand that.
So you have a much wider buffer, which is always gonna be encompassed, and will always encompass that stream. Because that's probably a couple thousand linear feet of stream, like intermittent stream delineation within an identified BBW. So like I said, I would like to have the consultant weigh in on it, because we did discuss that in the field, and it was determined that.
Their report says that the streams should be delineated. It's in their
We have-
report.
We have to weigh in.
Raina?
There, is it necessary?
Hi, sorry. So the, there we go. Sorry. So this is for the ANRAD. And an ANRAD is a comprehensive review and accurate description of the property. So I would include if a water course was there, regardless of whether it's intermittent or the jurisdiction is superseded by the wetland. You need to know that there's a water course there, because if you're building something and you want to impede the water course, you know, that's important to know that it is there.
Thank you. I agree. Okay, anything else? All right, at the next meeting on the 21st, we propose that we continue to that date. Is that okay? And remember that you don't have to appear on that date. If you need to continue, you can just ask for a continuance.
I don't intend on, I will be sure to let you know.
Okay. So on that day, they would be bringing back any extra documentation that they have, any other things that they want to respond to what they heard tonight. And we will actually discuss all of that. And the meeting after that, we will be debating our findings with each other. So all in favor of continuing until the 21st? All opposed? Okay. The hearing is continued until September 21st. Who seconded it? Ted, I thought. No, I have a couple other things to say, but they're not about this. Okay, I'm just going to review some upcoming cases for the commission now. So probably you don't care about those. You,
Can I ask one final question?
oh, sure.
So I guess I'm a little confused where on the website, the entire past 2 weeks, it's mentioned that the purpose of the meeting is directly to leave. Then today, in the meantime, something else happened, he was saying that during discussed broken.
No, they sent us a preliminary version of the revised delineation. That's all it is. It's just, they submitted us these maps. And then they're going to make revisions according to, like the fact that they've accepted the perennial stream. They'll change that to perennial in that map.
So that's the discussion that's referred to.
That's the discussion that's gonna go on next week, and that's their preliminary version of that. We received today, this afternoon.
So the point of the posting, the website.
What I did on the website was originally, it was just going to be time bond tonight.
Yeah, okay.
And then halfway through the day, Rory let us know that they were going to be coming in also. So I posted that so that people would know.
Just to make sure that it's as clear to people what's going on. It was just an attempt to clarify.
I don't have any.
All right, I just have to.
We're just looking for jump rock. Wouldn't take over time.
Oh, here, wait, Rory.
Okay. Then you can-
Let him sign before. you
I
go.
did it. Thank you so much. See you next week.
Okay, yes. But I wanted to go through the proper order, because that, yeah, their report wasn't included in tonight's agenda. So they can present it as their own comments, but they can't present it as a report until next meeting. So we had to kind of stick to that part of it. Yeah, they sent a report, and that's why I asked them to give me annual high water. It doesn't show up on their report. It does say perennial, and it does have the 100 and 200 buffers, but it doesn't show banks. So they have to add that. It also doesn't show the streams, which I thought, it says right in the time bond report that they thought it should be done. So,
They were saying it's not gonna be
yeah, I get that, but yeah, and it's gonna take, I mean, who wants to wait for all that crap out there? But the truth is, it becomes, for 3 years, it's what they use for any project. So if there's a project that could be in the DPW, but not over a stream,
Okay.
nobody would know.
Good night.
Okay.
So they have to go delineate. the streams.
Because it's supposed to be comprehensive.
Or-
Yeah, or they can continue if they can. Yeah. Actually, it's pretty easy. I mean, it's a long thing, but Ty and Bond has already said between markers, so and so and so and so, and between markers, so and so and so and so in this report. So all they have to do is go out and find those markers and say, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, they're having trouble finding it, but
They're isolated.
the ice-
Yeah.
so it's-
Yeah.
They're having trouble finding it.
They got it now. Seen a little bit more before we did that.
They don't really have to walk around. We,
Meeting, probably.
No, we haven't closed.
No, we haven't closed.
We ended that.
um,
We haven't closed our meeting.
we haven't closed our meeting because we have still a couple things to cover. I asked Raina if she was willing to include their former contract has no delineations. It specifies no delineations. But I asked her if they were willing to include delineating the isolated land subject to flood, because I could see that's going to be an ongoing problem and don't seem to be able to find it. Okay, the cases that are coming up, and Bonnie will be sending things to you, is 00 Stafford Road, that's Danielle Plank's Moriarty's proposal. She wants to cut an acre and a driveway. She's got Mesa land there. So, and even though she's cutting trees, it's not big enough for a forest cutting plan, so we have to We have to approve that.
And she
Uh,
filed through National Heritage.
Yeah, she already filed.
Yeah.
And we still have the complaint on the Burns property to deal with.
Yeah.
I figured you'd be exhausted tonight, we'll do it next time. But if we can, I'm gonna ask Bonnie to set up a site visit to get out there, so people can actually walk there.
Yeah.
The big question, I emailed back and forth with, Melanie Cheeseman and Lisa. And the big question is, they had a habitat management plan that allows them to cut along the riverfront that was active in 2016. It still would be in effect. Except she can't check it because they do a paper purge. And they didn't have a scanner in 2016, so they don't have the management plan. So if we can find it, we can look at that. But the question is, the relevant question is, there was a certain area that was designated for management. Now, when I remember 2016, it was to the right in front of the D'Angelo's house, right across the street. I don't know if it included the area to the left of that and the area to the left of that where they have this year.
Right.
So the question is, if he can't produce the plans and or it doesn't have that in it, he has to get his plan updated. So we'll just discuss all of that. But that's what you need to look at is where the cutting is. And somebody needs to measure how far the truck is from the bank.
Yeah.
Okay, also, maybe we'll have one on Chapin Road. Other ones in the works are one on Echo Valley, one on Munson Road, one on Maple Grove, one on Ridge Road. And most of them are garages or driveways.
And we
Yeah,
we
people are
did
getting busy,
receive,
so these are gonna be trickling in. Bonnie's been asked about them. She sent them out. I've written several very detailed sets of instructions. So I imagine they'll be trickling back in.
And we did receive an NOI today from the gas company. They're gonna be putting in a gas line on Hickory Lane area. So
So,
it's right after the areas.
before the 21st, we will probably have at least one, if
No.
probably two site visits, probably to the Burns property and to the Milburn Twins.
The gas line, they put that in the roadway?
I haven't read it yet.
I looked at it
Just
real
came
quick.
in.
A lot of it's gonna be on the side, but it's gonna be down Summers Road from roughly where the bagel house, shop is. Down Summers, across the bridge, down past Mill, about maybe two houses, and a spur up that first two houses of Hickory Lane. I sent it on to Bob and said, Bob, ever since you're planning to dig up the road, you're planning to pave it.
Thank you.
He's already sent it on to the town, to the town yard.
Okay,
I was wondering about, in the roadway work compared to outside the roadway.
I didn't look at it close enough. It's. I sent it out for them to look at.
okay, any other things before we close the hearing? The meeting, I'm sorry. Oh, yes,
Stepping back though, so I'm just trying to understand, you have one map that's in the print. And it does show, I don't know if you consider hydraulic connections, streams, or whatever they call them. Some they did recognize, some they did not. It's my understanding, it shows on a map, it is assumed to be a perennial.
no.
No. Okay.
In our GIS system, there's different kinds of lines for perennial and intermittent.
Okay.
But on the USGS system, depending what year it is.
Yeah.
On some years, it's all, whether it's intermittent or perennial, it's the same kind of line.
Okay.
So you can't tell till you go out
So I
and
guess
look
my
at it.
confusion came a little on that. Specialist was talking about, they were saying, well, we don't really have to show that this is included within the buffer zone. And I'm thinking, well, you don't even know if it's intermittent or perennial, because you didn't even put it on the map. So you really don't know what the buffer is on it. And so could it be 200?
Well, These are streamlets. They're like rivulets that are going across the wetland. But if there's moving water in the wetland, it's called a stream. If you can track the movement of the water.
Okay.
So, I think we're all presuming that it's an intermittent stream, that sometimes it dries up. But, it still has to be more.
All right, and that was one question, we just want clarification.
Yeah.
Let's say it was in the
They
buffer.
said when they went out there, it was flowing. Both of those streams were flowing, no.
Yeah,
That was odd.
okay, we just were trying to understand. how
Yeah.
that applies to it.
It's a good question.
Okay, and then, of course, you know, before there is a string on, just on the boundary of the property that, this is from. I mean, it hasn't been with the boundary to overlap that property.
Not really sure.
Yeah, so it's tributary.
They did include the buffer from Eastbrook onto the property.
Yeah, but not in that corner.
Not on the out the corner where they
Okay, we'll
we'll
check that out.
discovered the wetland, is where the stream is, right above. Goes back up and then. Yeah, the word is fine. It shows on all of them, so it's like, okay, that's actually part of it.
It's very confusing. We're trying to understand it.
Yeah, also,
And we also
something I
looked-
didn't say tonight, but I will be clarifying next week, is they can't go onto another property that wasn't in the proposal. And even though we wrote our proposal to Ty and Bond covering both parcels, the ANRAD was not submitted with the names of both parcels on it. So they didn't feel they could walk onto the other properties. If something relevant to the project is on the other property, that will have to be delineated at that time.
Okay.
So, you know, if you see something that you know is like on that neighboring property and they didn't talk about it, or they said, we just looked at it across, that's because they didn't feel they could go onto that property.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
I understand.
Which also means, of course, they couldn't walk out to see that other
I'm
stream.
trying to point the education, then I look at it one way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, yeah,
Thank you.
we all.
Right.
Take a motion to close the meeting. Second.
Yeah, they might get home.
Hungry.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, were you not done?
No, well, she hasn't said it.
All those in favor of closing the meeting,
Aye.
second?
They were talking to
Okay.
Meeting's closed.
Yes,
Okay,
meeting is
you have to
adjourned.
decide, because I gotta shut
Yes,
it
the
down.
meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
So you made the motion? I thought Andrew.
Andrew made the motion.
He made the
John
motion.
seconded.
I took
Okay.
the vote and I
Oh,
took
all
the
right.
second.
Okay, got it.